Okay, so after the Bolsheviks consolidated power, after the Women's Civil War, everyone assumes that Trotsky would be the new leader. But it's Stalin that becomes the new leader, okay? Why? Because after the war ends, there's expectation among the Bolsheviks that, we help the transnational capital so much, they're gonna help us rebuild our nation, okay? They're gonna give us loans, they will give us technology to help us rebuild Russia. And guess what happened? Transnational capital says, no, you guys are good, we're good, we made our money, okay? And so now what's happening is that Leon Trotsky, who is a Jew, he gets blamed, right? Because Leon Trotsky is the one who brought in transnational capital, he's the one who facilitated this exchange. And now the Bolsheviks thinking, oh, this is a Jewish conspiracy. You Jews were planning this all along to steal everything from us and then screw us over in the end, okay? And that's why Stalin won. All right, so let's go over the difference between Leon Trotsky and Joseph Stalin. Leon Trotsky did not work for transnational capital. Okay? He was first and foremost a revolutionary who was interested in global revolution. He had a messianic calling to transform and save the world. But he was accused of being transnational capital, and because he was a Jew, everyone just assumed that he was a spy, okay? And he also had a personality which was arrogant and aloof. Stalin had his own issues, okay? But he benefited from the fact that Trotsky was a Jew, and he was able to slowly amass power for himself. He also has a background as a police informant, but being a spy for the capitalists was a much worse crime. All right? And that's why Joseph Stalin won in the end. And this is terrible for the Jews, the Bolshevik Jews who believed in the revolution, because they all got killed by Joseph Stalin. Okay? Leon Trotsky was killed along with all his children. All right, so it's not just that transnational capital supported the Bolsheviks, they also supported Karl Marx, okay? All right, so Karl Marx has an interesting background. He actually comes from many generations of rabbis. So he's basically a Jewish aristocrat. And he was German, but then he moved to England. And he wrote many letters, wrote many books to promote communism. These books aren't going to sell well. So he was poor all his life. But what's interesting is he lived a very nice life, okay? He lived in England and he lived a basic middle class life. So where did he get all his money from? Well, he got all his money from Friedrich Engels, who was a friend of his and whose father was an industrialist, okay, a Jewish industrialist. So why would a Jewish capitalist support Karl Marx? And the answer is because communism benefits transnational capital, okay? So why? Why would it benefit transnational capital? All right, can you read, Amber? So this is a letter written by Karl Marx, okay?
For as soon as the distribution of labor comes into being, each man has a particular exclusive sphere of activity which is forced upon him and from which he cannot escape. He is a hunter, a fisherman, a herdsman, or a critical critic, and must remain so if he does not want to lose his means of livelihood. While in communist society, where nobody has one exclusive sphere of activity, but each can become accomplished in any branch he wishes, society regulates the general production and thus makes it possible for me to do one thing today and another tomorrow, to hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, rear cattle in the evening, criticize after dinner, and as I have a mind, without ever becoming hunter, fisherman, herdsman, or critic.
Okay, so the problem with capitalism is that it degrades our individuality. We as individuals want freedom to enjoy ourselves, right? This is a very Frankist idea, right? We want to enjoy ourselves, we want to be free to enjoy the pleasures of life. The problem with capitalism is the idea of specialization, right? Where you're forced to do one thing only, according to the needs of the capitalists, okay? Can you keep on reading, Amber? Okay.
Supposing that we had produced in a human manner, in his production each of us would have doubtly affirmed himself and his fellow men. I would have objectified in my production my individuality and its peculiarity, and would thus have enjoyed in my activity an individual expression of my life, and would have also had, in looking at the object, the individual pleasure of realizing that my personality was subjective, visible to the senses, and therefore a power raised beyond all doubt.
Okay, so what he's saying here is that before, each of us were craftspeople. So I might make a vase, okay? And when I make a vase, then this vase is an expression of my individuality, an expression of my creativity. And by looking at this vase, it becomes an objective symbol of my existence. I can look at this vase and my own individuality will be reflected back at me, okay? Keep on going.
In your enjoyment or use of my product, I would have had the direct enjoyment of realizing that by my work I had both satisfied a human need and also objectified the human essence, and therefore fashioned for another human being the object that met his need.
Then I give you this vase to a friend, and I see this vase at my friend's home, right? And he puts flowers, and he's very happy with this vase. And then I can see my impact in the world. All right, keep on reading, Amber.
I would have been for you the mediator between you and the species, and thus been felt by you and acknowledged as a completion of your own essence and a necessary part of yourself. And I would thereby have realized that I was confirmed both in your thought and in your love.
Okay, so this vase now shapes your reality. And I know that this vase has given you meaning, and it has shaped your reality, and therefore I find meaning in that, okay? And again, this is a very Frankist attitude, right? Where you can project your imagination onto people and it can shape the way he or she sees reality. Okay, this is a very similar concept. Keep on going.
In my expression of my life, I would have fashioned your expression of your life, and thus in my own activity have realized my own essence, my human communal essence.
Okay, right. So again, this is something that sounds perfectly correct, right? And the reason why it sounds correct to us is because it becomes a basis for our society. Okay, the idea of individualism, the idea of materialism. Okay, keep on going.
In such a situation, our products would be like so many mirrors, each one reflecting our essence. Thus, in this relationship, what occurred on my side would also occur on yours.
Okay, so this is a really important metaphor, okay? He's saying that objects become mirrors where we can see our own individuality reflected, okay? And this goes against the religious concept where our humanity is all reflected in each of us. Okay? So what he's doing is creating a material outlook. Does that make sense? He's denying the existence of God, he's denying the existence of spirituality, but he's taking the concepts of religion and applying it to a material world. Right? He recognizes that we have these spiritual, religious needs. And what he's saying is that we don't need God to achieve these needs. We can have materialism achieve these needs, okay? Which again is a very Frankist concept. Keep on going.
My work would be a free expression of my life, and therefore a free enjoyment of my life. In work, the peculiarity of my individuality would have been affirmed since it is my individual life. Work would thus be genuine, active property. Presupposing private property, and my individuality is so far externalized that I hate my activity. It is a torment to me and only the appearance of an activity, and thus also merely a forced activity that is laid upon me through an external, arbitrary need, not an inner and necessary one.
Okay, so why would transnational capital support this idea? The reason why is that before the debate was mind versus matter, right? What matters more, the spirit or the flesh? And what Marx is saying is, no, what matters, well, the debate, the dialectic is between private property versus public property. In private property, I have to work for someone else. In public property, I work for myself. That's the question, that's the debate, that's the dialectic, okay? And so by doing this, it's a very clever trick that transnational capital uses by making us think that the only thing that matters is private versus public, as opposed to mind versus matter, okay? That's the goal of communism. That's why transnational capital is supporting this idea, because it advances the goal of empire, which is turn us all into slaves. Okay, does that make sense? All right. All right, so Marx is correct in analyzing the problems of capitalism, okay? But his problem is that he believes the solution is to make capital public. And as a result, this will create a workers' paradise. But there are problems with this, okay? So let's go over some of the problems. Okay, Marx believes that history is linear progress. So capitalism will lead to socialism, which will lead to communism. It is a linear progress, okay? Second is a problem that history is teleological, meaning things go the way they should. Marx also believes that what matters is class struggle between the rich and the poor, as opposed to between spirit and flesh, okay? And the last thing that's the most problematic is Marx believes you need a vanguard in order to lead the proletariat into a socialist paradise. You need an elite in order to lead us into paradise. And this eschatology is all Frankist, right? This is something that we learned last class. This is something that Frank proposed, where his group is a new people which will lead people into a material paradise. Right? So all Marx is doing is taking Jacob Frank's ideas and systemizing it. Now, I'm not saying that Marx was a Frankist. He's probably not a Frankist. But what I'm saying is that there are people around him, like Friedrich Engels, who could have been a Frankist, and as such, and they used their money to influence Marx in a way. Okay? And we can suspect this because there's certain ideas that don't make sense. If you are a socialist, you believe in democracy. But Marx believed in a dictatorship. Okay, that makes no sense. All right? So